Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered, the podcast that takes the mystery out of commercial real estate and makes it accessible for everyone. I'm Caleb David, a broker, investor, and community builder with over a decade of experience helping businesses and individuals bring their visions to life. Here we break down the market, share expert insights, and talk about the opportunities that commercial real estate creates for businesses and communities alike. No fluff, no gatekeeping, just real, unfiltered conversations that empower you to navigate the space with confidence. So whether you're an investor, a business owner, or simply curious about commercial real estate, welcome. Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered. I'm really excited today for our guest because we're going to dive into some pretty deep stuff that's going to be transformational that I hope for each and every one of you. I want you guys to meet Maggie Boillot. She is a self-development and mindset mentor, a podcast host, and a speaker who helps women release what no longer serves them and reclaim their power and rewrite their story. After transforming her own life from self-doubt to self-leadership, she now guides others to do the same through a blend of compassion, humor, and proven methods that make growth feel both empowering and fun. Her mission is to help you live unapologetically and create the life that feels fully aligned to who you are. Maggie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Caleb. I'm so excited to be here. So excited when I hear those things, when people read them out loud, you're just like, yes, this is so good. So thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. And we talked briefly before we got started about how transformation and growth is just a huge part of every one of our lives. Doesn't matter if it's in commercial real estate. We all have ego. We all have our hurt and our journeys and our own suffering that sometimes we create for ourselves. But before we dive in, I'd love to have you share a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what you're all about.
Yeah, so my name is Maggie. Like you've mentioned, I have a lot of times in my life felt like I am always shifting and pivoting because I think that that's a part of life. And so I love to coach on the self-discovery aspect, also with mindset, a touch of fitness, a touch of kind of everything, because I think that there's such a value in knowing that you can be multifaceted and it's okay to do so because there's so many things out there that we can do or we can label ourselves as, and I have a really hard time labeling myself as one thing versus the other. So I struggle with that, but I love to coach on self-awareness and leading from that. Most oftentimes in our life, what we're allowing and the decisions that we are making is really truly what's holding us hostage, especially if you're holding yourself into that toxic cycle or you're kind of waking up with it is what it is kind of mindset and just believing that you aren't worthy or deserving of having a happier, more fulfilling life. And I'm guilty as charged for that. My story dates back quite a few years ago when I really truly had lost my entire self inside of a relationship. And a lot of people didn't realize that truly what was happening was I was suffering in silence because I looked so different on the outside. And I was really, truly wrapped up in an identity that I thought I needed to keep to have a life.
Yeah.
Although I just needed to shed that identity that I had become
Yeah.
to actually step into a new version of myself. And so that's what I love to talk about is it's never too late to rewrite your story. I literally had to rewrite mine at 35 years old.
Mm. That really resounds with me because I've been on a similar journey and continue to be on that journey. And I
Mhm.
think self-awareness and you speak about identity. And I think, I've talked about this in other podcasts before about how for me, with my background in the nonprofit sector, doing work in social justice, being successful in commercial real estate, those were all things that I had latched onto because the way I was raised in an ultra-conservative Christian home, a preacher's kid, there were definite expectations put on you, and this is the way you are to act in the world. And to me, I feel like when I had my awakening and my dark night of the soul, it almost was like I was discovering myself for the first time. So you speak of self-awareness, you know, what are some initial steps that people can take to begin that self-awareness journey? Because that's the first step on this journey of healing.
So I think self-awareness, I have it's literally in one word with five simple letters, of course, and it spells out the word aware. And I think it's so simple to talk about it that way because we tend to overcomplicate our processes and we tend to think that something is so much further than it is. And I did that for a decade. I thought, well, how could I truly do all those things? And I think it just comes down to really, truly becoming aware and acknowledging what do I feel like? Because a lot of times I even just said this the other day on my Instagram. I'm not okay. And sometimes it's okay to not be okay. And who out there just feels like you're saying, okay, I'm okay? Is okay just the answer that we've just been so accustomed to saying? Or is it really truly that you are just okay?
Yeah.
And so I think that first step is really truly just acknowledging and having that grace of actually pausing
Yeah.
because we're so go, 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 go all the time that we lose track of really how do we feel? How are we reacting to things? How are we in our environment? How do we feel? Are we constantly, sluggish? Are we constantly, feeling as we're not enough? Are we those types of things you really have to become aware of because when you're surrounded by the wrong people, you're gonna feel that way.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
Yeah, how do you so I'm an empath,
Hmm.
and I can walk into a room and I can feel everybody's stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I tend to be more others aware than self-aware.
Oh, yes.
And it's been a discipline, and you said it so well. And in fact, a case in point, as I mentioned to you before, I recorded two other podcasts earlier today, and I was just like in this spot. And I'm like, I've got to show up and be fully present for this next one because I was really excited about it. But I knew I had to do something.
Mhm.
And I set a timer for 10 minutes, went out into my garden and just sat in silence, you know, to be able to feel, what am I feeling right now? Is it nervousness about getting on a podcast? Is it this? Is it that? Listening to the birds and just kind of trying to reconnect with nature and myself for some grounding. But what are some other tools that you suggest, or services that you provide that kind of help that self-awareness come to mind? And also for empaths in the room or listening, you
Yeah.
know, how do they, what are some tips for them, to walk into a room and not be overwhelmed by other people?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I'm the same way. I'm like, ooh, how's that person feeling? What does that person feel like? Oh gosh. And then I'm like, well, wait a second, what about me? So yeah, I think that what you hit it on the head about taking that step back and sitting in silence. And I like to say that silence is often the loudest noise that we need to hear. And I think it's just so important because a lot of people feel like silence is more of like almost like a punishment or something, or some sort of feeling that they're supposed to have when they're in silence. And so I think my biggest thing is I have really been focusing on the fact that if I were to walk into a room and I would feel like I'm kind of looking at everybody else and feeling out everybody else, I have to take that step back and come back into what I feel like. Because I could feel anxious. I could feel scared. I could feel small. I could feel all the things. And it's okay to feel those things because when you start to feel
Mm.
into your feelings, that's when self-awareness happens. That's when you get to take control. That's when you're in your power. And I like to talk about when you're aware, you're more alive and you're more present and you're also in your power. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is it's not selfish to
Right,
be self-aware.
right.
It's actually very it's something that I feel like we need to all start understanding that when we can be in tune with who we are
Yeah.
and trust our own instincts and trust our own souls,
Mm,
we will go into a room and we'll know exactly how we feel. And if it doesn't feel good, guess what? You get to leave. You get to walk
absolutely.
away.
That power of saying no, and boundaries, and
Oh, yeah.
just that energetic feeling that you get
Hmm.
when you finally trust yourself for the first time.
Hmm.
And I think that's such a missing piece in identity. I think because in identity, I feel very often it is something or expectations that are forced upon us. And so if someone is not self-aware, what are some ways that you see that manifests in their work life, in their family? What are some things that you notice that self-awareness does to sabotage true identity?
Yeah, I think you play small. You protect you're protecting everybody else besides yourself. So that people pleasing, I always hate that word. I really hate people pleasing because I was like, I'm not a people pleaser. I don't people please. But in all reality, I think when you are kind of like it's like a wearing a mask around certain people, or you're saying that this identity, like for me, my identity was connected to a piece of my life, but that didn't mean that was who I was. I
Yeah.
mean, it created me to be that person, but in all reality, I was still able to shed that. And so I think a lot of times, if we're trying to not be, or if we're not self-aware, or like I kind of said, you kind of shrink in a room, or you feel like you're having to protect other people's energy before you think of your own, you're going to start to find yourself in the positions and the places and the experiences that truly diminish who you truly are. And I think that that's what most people don't realize is that we've been conditioned to people please. We've been conditioned to play small. We've been conditioned to stay in the comfort zone, but we also can recondition or reprogram ourselves to understand that that was something that was in the past, who someone who loves you dearly created for yourself. But guess what? You get to break free and stop holding yourself hostage, especially like you said, you had a dark night to the soul, you had the awakening. Once you see it and once you feel it, there ain't anything going back because you're
Agree.
like, oh, okay, I feel it. I feel the energy. I want more. I crave more. I will be more.
Yes.
And come hell or high water, or people that don't like me, that's okay because I don't like everybody either, you
Yeah,
know? And so
absolutely.
it's just that common, that nice balance between understanding that you are a person and so is the other person. And we need to stop judging and criticizing and um, holding on to things that were in our past that really don't serve us anymore. And that's one of the other words in my little framework I like to use is release the things that don't serve you anymore. And
Yes.
I think that our part is the hardest because we want to hold on. We
Mhm.
want to white knuckle things that feel good, although they're chaotic and crappy.
Yeah.
We tend to want to hang
Yeah.
on to that.
Absolutely, because it's what we know. It feels safe to us, even though it is now
Yep.
doing us a disservice. One of my favorite books is by Father Richard Rohr called Falling Upward, where he talks about the first and second half of life. You know, how the things and the identities and the tools in our younger years served us to protect us. But at some point, something happens and there has to be that release. So how
Mm.
do you see, tools like detachment or, how does that fit into the releasing process to get you closer to that self-awareness?
So I think for me, releasing is being one of those things that it comes with practice. It comes with a process. I think a lot of us think that, we wake up the next morning and all of us are just this new, different human, and we still don't have the same struggles or the same thought processes and things. And so I think when release, it's like you have to understand that things happen in your life to refine you to the person that you're meant to be, really. And that's what I like to talk about because I think people think, well, oh, this keeps happening to me and the woe is me or the victim mentality. And I think that that's where we have to realize that if it keeps happening, it's the universe, God, divine, whatever you believe in, giving you the sign to say, wake up, listen, learn, grow, and evolve, or don't release it, and I'm just going to keep putting you in that pattern. Again, guilty as charged for 12 years of my life. I wasn't able to release because I was still thinking, well, it's okay. It's okay to be cheated on. It's okay to be manipulated. It's okay to be, basically walked all over. This is what I chose.
Right.
And then, in fact, it was like once I released that and decided to say, like, no, I deserve better, the universe, God divine, will put you into a new pathway. And so I think that that's what's so scary for people is they don't want to detach because, like you already mentioned, it's so secure.
Yeah.
It's there, it's certain, and it's certain it's chaos. It's certain it's crap. It's certain I wake up in anxious moods.
The devil you know.
Right. And so it's about being able to surrender to yourself and say, I want a new reality, but I can't keep this reality and have a new one. And
Yes.
I think that's the hardest part for people is they feel as if they have to shed their entire, I mean, I did. I shed it. I shedded. I don't think that's a word, but I really had to shed my entire life. But guess what? I'm still Maggie. I'm still who I am. I just don't have the protective layer on anymore.
You're softer.
Yeah.
So what was that catalyst to that awakening for you?
It's funny because a lot of people ask me, oh, did he cheat on you again? What happened? What were the things that just made you just shift? And I was finally sick and tired of hearing myself lie to myself.
Mm,
And it was lie after lie after lie for protection of someone else.
yes.
And it's so hard to swallow now because you're like, what the heck? Like, and there's so many times in my life where I've looked back and I thought, gosh, how many times did I cry myself to work? How many times did I cry myself on the way home from work? How many times did I tell myself, it will get better, it will get better, he will get better, I will change, my thoughts will change, life will change? You can't wish that for anybody or anything in your life. You have to take the signs. I always call it feedback. Is your feedback good? Is it not? Because if it's really not, it's time to tune in and shift the frequency of your radio station. Because a lot of times we just sit and listen to it and we're like, oh
Right.
well, the okay, I'm all right, no worries. It is what it is. I'm like, every time somebody says that, I'm like, no, it doesn't have to be. It is what it is. You are in your control and your power to say that it isn't what I want, and I can control what I do want
Yeah.
by
So what's some
changing.
advice you give to people that come and are mentored and coached by you when they're early in the process to get them to be able to realize that what is here right now is not the life that you really want to live, and how do you make that leap of faith to make that jump, because it's scary. I mean,
Oh,
I blew my life up, everything,
hmm,
and
yeah.
that's what it took for me to become more self-aware
Hmm.
and to become more comfortable in my own skin. So what are maybe some next steps or tips that you have that you kind of help to, or tools that you provide, for folks who are scared and need that reassurance?
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down, mine's always word choices. And so I talk about trust, courage, and strength because for a decade of my life, I had absolutely zero trust in practically anyone or anything. I wasn't courageous enough to feel like I could do anything different for my life. And I had zero strength. I looked badass because I owned a fitness company, and all on the outside, I looked like I could probably, do some business in the parking lot. But it came down to when I started to think about it, I needed to trust myself and trust the unknown. I always say that too, like fear is not going to go away. Judgment isn't going to go away. Criticism, all those things are not, they don't go away because we all know that people have opinions no matter if you're killing it at life or you're just not doing it so well. So for me, it came down to that I like to talk about that when I'm working with somebody is that no matter how hard it is right here, it isn't any harder over here.
Yeah.
So we always like I start by asking like what is the hard right now? Because the hard right now actually can be really simple over here when you have the mindset shifts around what are you controlling? What can you control? I guess is the better word to say, because we can't control what everybody else is doing. We can't control outcomes. We don't even know what's going to happen in 3 seconds, really.
Yeah.
Life changes just like that. And so I think it's a really just when I work with somebody, we do it so simply around what in your life feels chaotic? What in your life doesn't feel right? Because most of the time we're overcomplicating the uncertain of the unknown because it's uncertain. We don't really know. So we second guess it. We wonder, we're not sure. But yet, why don't we ever second guess what's the chaotic messiness?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really just truly about that first step is acknowledging the fact that you get to trust a new path.
Mm.
No one knows where the bricks lay, but you get to lay the new bricks because that's what's happened in our lives is we've and we're trying to follow that path. And no wonder it feels bumpy and no wonder it feels like you're on a roller coaster because you're not in your own power to say, this doesn't align with me. So it's like helping people identify their strengths.
Yeah.
Yes, we have to identify the weaknesses, but why do we stay at the weaknesses? Like we all have strengths. So it's like finding your own jam, you know?
Yeah.
What lights you up is the first part you need to figure out because most oftentimes when you're stuck in that toxic or you're stuck kind of in the cycles of life,
Mm.
it's because you haven't found what truly lights your soul on fire.
I love that. When you talk about chaos, and what came to my mind is how is chaos a sign of misalignment with your values? And do you find that people who struggle with that chaos maybe lack a clear direction of what their values are?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think, like you mentioned in the very beginning, I think we're all conditioned at a certain age. You know, I was just talking to my fiance about this. Like, we're a product of our product, right? We were birthed by our parents or whomever is taking care of you, and you really adopt things like that. And so I think your values, and I love to say this because I think that your values do not have to be what your parents' values are.
Yes.
Um, I have an alarm going off in my house. I'm like, what's happening? So sorry if you can hear that, folks. I don't think it's a fire, hopefully. But yeah, so it's one of those things where you're kind of just the values don't have to be someone else's. And that's going back to that whole like you just went and sat in your garden and you listened and we get to create what feels good for us. The values that someone else has does not dictate what your values need to be. And
Yeah.
it's standing in your own truth. Don't rely on what others are saying to you because we all have done it.
Yeah.
And it happens, but realigning with your values will help you not feel so chaotic
Yeah. I love that.
because the chaos is there to, I believe your chaos is the feedback that life is giving you. And if your feedback, I say this all the time, if it sounds like that AM radio and it is just static and it's unclear, you feel just drained, that's your feedback. And
Yeah.
it's time for you to understand that that's not the way that life has to be.
Yeah. And I think you just talking it, I love the word create. And it's actually
Mhm.
one of the things that for our company is that we create space and we build community. And that applies to real estate, but it applies to real life because those
Mhm.
are values. And you spoke about this earlier, how you're one way over here at work, you're one way at home, and it's almost like you're dividing yourself up into multiple personalities even, but how do you find that people can integrate those things? Obviously, self-awareness, therapy is a huge help, but what are some of the I mean, I guess maybe what are some of your personal values? I'd be curious to hear kind of, and I believe that values change over time, but maybe for this snapshot in life, what are some of the top two or three of values that are most important to you?
You know, I value like a value to me, and it could be different for everybody. I think for me, value is love and respect of yourself.
Hmm.
And I think so many people think that just because you love yourself first is so selfish, or these are things. So like for me, a value is just I value love.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I value lots of other things, but I feel like for me too, sometimes I have to practice what I preach. And so when I just said compassionate, it was one of the first words that came out of my mouth. I thought to myself, well, I need to practice that a little bit more for myself.
Mhm.
And so I think the value around everything can change. It, like you said, it's a course and it's a drip, right where you're at could have so many different ways and things. But I don't know if I can pinpoint values. I feel like for me, always think about like you kind of acted like you were saying like we kind of act differently in different situations which is so silly. I always like to say, like, what do you like when the cameras are off? What are you like when no one's watching you? Because those are your values. Those are your cores
Mm,
of who you are and who you want to be and what you want to act like. And don't protect those when you go to work. Don't protect those when you get into a relationship. We
mhm.
tend to kind of like, what do I want to say? Like like morph
Yeah.
to a new relationship. We're like, ooh, well, maybe he'll like me because I have like this value or this or that
Yeah.
or whatever. But it's like, but is that you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, because that's what I did for my decade-long relationship that should have ended day two, but it didn't. And even now that I'm in a happy, healthy relationship, like I showed up as me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my values were that I wanted to find love and passion and I value respect. I value people who see me for me, not who they think that I should be.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that really answered your question because values to me can just be so many things.
No, I actually have never heard that perspective before, and I actually really love it. And it brought me back to when my very slow awakening began, maybe about 10 years ago, when I made the decision, whether it be politically, religion,
Mhm.
work, whatever, because I worked in the social justice area. So there was I'm a justice person. I'm like, there's a right and there's a
Yeah.
wrong. And but life is more complicated than that. And so for me, a changing point for me was when I started to believe I want to make my decisions out of love, not out of fear.
Mm,
And like you said earlier, you said fear is always going to be there, but I think we forget that love is always there too if we allow it and
mm.
if we foster and create that within ourselves and within our community. I know you deal with people that have a lot of toxic relationships. You've shared yours. What are some things that help people heal from toxic relationships?
Um, I think honestly, vulnerability is one of the biggest words and being able to open up because my story is uniquely mine. Yours is yours, whatever it is. But through that, with healing and knowing that you're not alone is a huge step. And I suffered in silence for a decade. People knew, but I was like, nah, I'm fine. And then when I was first like rebirthing basically and recreating myself or coming back to myself really, I think that it was the biggest part for me was to be able to um, know that by me being me or showing the world who I was to heal
Yeah.
the new opportunities, the new people, the new experiences were going to align with who I wanted to become. And so I think that healing is just, it's my biggest thing about healing is that you need to just get out and experience new things
Mm,
for me, I was a fitness professional for a decade of my life. I had built this company, I had all these things, and I was like, oh my gosh, but I can't leave Palengo because if I did leave Palengo, I wouldn't be Maggie. And then it was like, but wait, I am still Maggie. So when I started to heal, it was more about being able to say to myself, kind of like the values, the morals, the ethics, the things that I wanted in my life is you have to come back to your center. And I think that's what a lot of times I am still guilty of it. I still sometimes I'm like, well, should I do this or how should I do that? And healing is that process of day to day choosing to become more aware of who you are, what you want, and what you allow and what you don't allow anymore. And so that first process, I think, is just really truly. We all know this, the rebound effect, right? We all know that a lot of times we get out of an unhealthy relationship, and that first person that looks at us, we're like, oh yeah, here it goes again, and we haven't healed. We
yes.
haven't come back to, so we're going to attract the same types of situations. And I think that that's the biggest part I like to tell people is I always hear like I have some clients and they're like, "Yeah, I'm in a new relationship already." And I'm like, "Well, it's been about 3 weeks. So hold on.
Yeah.
Let's get into a relationship with yourself and start the process of creating the magic that's inside of you and authentically showing that to other people because the right people are going to find that authenticity. We vibrate on the frequency that we're putting out. And so when you can love yourself and radiate love from the inside, that's what you'll find. And I was one of the rebounders where I was like, yeah, this guy is showing me some love. This is so great. And then I quickly realized that it was that same toxic energy that I had in the relationship I just got over. So I was like, whoa, buddy, the dangling of the carrot ain't gonna work for me anymore. I need to know that you really actually like me. And so I think when you start to tune into yourself first after that toxic relationship is when you can truly then start to branch out, meet new people, show the world the real you. Don't hide, don't put the mask on, and also take off that protective shell that you've probably had on. Because I think you're going to meet the people that are meant to be in your life. And I just believe that with all of the things that have happened with me. I let my guard down. And then Mr. Wonderful walked into my life, or I stepped into his. And, so I think it's just all about how you can really treat yourself with the love and respect first.
Yeah.
Because when you don't love yourself, no one will love you the way that you need to be loved.
And do you find that same kind of these same principles apply in, say, toxic work environments?
Yes.
Um, it seems to me like these things are kind of universal with any kind of toxic relationship, whether, and I think we often have that toxic relationship with ourselves,
Mm.
you know? And so
Yeah.
we don't give ourselves the grace and we don't have the courage to look into who we really are without any of the labels that are out there.
Hmm.
And have you experienced like what kind of changes? Because with changes like this come significant loss, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so how have you seen that with any of your coaching clients, like how making this decision to choose themselves has, at first negatively impacted their life and our business? And then, how do they get to the other side?
Yeah. I think that it really negatively impacts you if you hold on to the things that you shouldn't hold on to. I mean, for me, I walked away from a business. So I actually had, I mean, if technically we'd say it was in a toxic business, but I was in a toxic relationship we were the owners of the business. So I had so many layers to mine. But even for me, I have this girl who I worked with a lot, and, you know, the toxicity of that when it leaves your body, we crave it, right? And so it's a lot of times we're in the cycle, so it's like that pattern of, well, but I don't have this anymore. And I think you hit it on the head too, of like the toxic relationships with ourselves. And so when you're toxic to yourself, you're going to create toxicity. So it's like that first relationship outside of the toxic one is actually the hardest, because it's the hardest one because it's with yourself. And a lot of people skip over that part. And so I think that for me, like that grieving process, it takes time. And I've even had women ask me, well, how come I'm still thinking about that person, even though they were so toxic to me? And it's like, well, because you're human, right? Like we all tend to just think like we're just supposed to like whoop, erase.
Yeah,
And we wish we could. I wish I could just like, whoop, everything was gone and I just started and I walked out back and I was like, okay, I'm good.
right.
But that's what I think most people forget is that grieving someone who even was toxic, or a relationship at work, or a job environment that is toxic, it takes time for you to almost process, well, what did I, because it all comes back to you, right? It should come back to, gosh, why was I allowing those behaviors? Why was I allowing the decisions that I was making in my life to just continue to stay stuck and unfulfilled? So you start to question all of it. And that's when it starts to then process through, and you're like, well, gosh, yeah, like I really shouldn't have been doing the things that I was doing, or allowing the behaviors, or having people walk all over me, especially at work. A lot of times people are like, well, it's fine. It's just my job. It's my boss.
Right.
No, that's not how it has to be. So I think that, yeah, the grieving process just it's long, and people think that it's just gonna be, trust me, there's times where I think about my ex, and for 10 years I don't even know if I thought about my person in front of me, because I was so blinded by all the stuff and the chaos.
Yeah.
And so now when I think about, I'm like, well, I wonder what he's doing these days. Or, and then you're thinking, well, that's probably not right. I shouldn't think about that. So stop labeling things too, because grieving can be such a process that it could filter back through even 3, 4 years from now. You could be like, wow, I wonder what they're doing. That's not a bad thing. It's because we're human and we care about people.
Well, I feel like in our society, we're not really, especially here in the United States, we don't spend a whole lot of teaching or learning about grief, the
No,
importance of grieving.
just push it under the rug.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Time heals. No, it
Yeah,
doesn't.
no, it doesn't. I think time heals if you put the work in and you reach into that self-awareness and into those,
Right.
you said, new experiences, new people, and reprogramming yourself. Um, how and where do you find that forgiveness fits into all
Mm.
of this?
It's the number one thing you have to have. And I think that a lot of times people are like, how can you forgive that person or that, whatever? And forgiveness isn't about them, it's about you being able to forgive them because I always say this, life happens for you, not to you. So you had these things happening to you, so you have to thank them and forgive them and say, I learned my lesson, maybe the real hard way, maybe the real long way, but I've learned it, and it's what molds you and shapes you into the person you're supposed to be. Because all the things that have happened to me throughout my entire life, if they hadn't happened, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today and being so proud about why I want to help people reclaim their life. Because it's just so true, and I think that that's just a big part of it. And forgiveness is, you've got to forgive them, but then you also have to forgive yourself, because we could beat ourselves up until we're blue in the face, but it doesn't do any good. We have made mistakes, we've chosen decision, all the things that we've done, but if we sit, we're letting that define us.
Mm.
And we're letting that dictate a new reality. And it's so important to forgive. And people think, oh, well, forgiving is this. And well, forgive and let me know how it feels when you forgive somebody. And then when you forgive yourself, let me know how it feels, because it feels like a whole entire burden is released off of your shoulders because you're no longer holding on to those things that were meant to destroy you, really. I think a lot of times we don't think about that.
Yeah,
What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and what doesn't destroy us makes us, flourish even further. And so I think it's just a very important thing, is forgiveness is huge. And I think a lot of people hold on to it for the simple fact of that it's like, I don't know, I don't even know how to label it, because it's kind of a sad thing. Like, just because you're forgiving somebody doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It's
right.
just allowing yourself to be able to say, you know what?
Yeah,
Thank you. I forgive you.
yeah. Do you find that it's, with your clients that forgiveness is like a one moment in time, or do you find that it's similar to grief in that it's also a period of going back and re-forgiving?
I would say it's definitely a period. I mean, when I first was out of my relationship, I didn't forgive everything. I forgave the fact that it happened at first, but then it took me a long process to be able to forgive all of the things that had happened. I mean, I'm 5 years out of my relationship and still have some certain things that have loose ends that haven't been tied. So I'm still having to kind of forgive as it goes around. But, I think you need to allow yourself the time it takes to forgive it. We tend to always say like, well, if I forgive it, it's gone, or this, and we all label time as something, and we're always searching for that next destination or the next something, or how am I going to feel when this happens? And it's just being okay with the forgiveness and just being able to release it and then moving on. And if something else comes up and you really need to kind of process it, allow yourself the time to process it. I'm still processing certain things in my life. And like I said, it was 5 years ago. And people think that it just gets erased or that time heals it. And if like you said, if you heal it with the right intention of moving forward, it will dissipate and it will feel better. But if you're just saying, well, time will heal this and that, you numb it, you push it under the rug, and then that's when you fall in the cycles again. That's when the patterns start to repeat.
And I think in that moment, you're minimizing yourself again. You're making yourself small.
Hmm.
And I feel like I could talk to you for literally hours, but out of respect for your time, like if someone is looking to reclaim their life, and this has inspired them, and they're ready to take the next step, how do they find you? How do they get a hold of you? And we'll share all the details in the show notes as well. But when someone's ready to reclaim, you know, where do they find you?
Yeah, so I think the biggest my biggest platform that I love to speak on and just come out with my truth and be able to say that it is your choice, it is your decision to change your life is it's I always say this and it's just power within her dot Inc. That's my Instagram page, and why I called it the power within her is because the power is within inside of you to reclaim and rewrite your story, but do not do it alone, because when you do it alone, you feel so alone. And it's one of those things that healing and growing is meant to do with someone else who has been where you are right now and is getting to where you think you want to go. And so I think the power within her page is just one of those where it's a story of my life. It's a monumental page for me because it was something that I said, I'm going to start and I'm going to create a safe place for people to really, truly reclaim their power and rewrite their story. And I think some people are like, I don't really understand what that means, but you will once you start to understand that you have the choice and it's your decision to stand in your power, to become more aware, and to feel more alive in your life, because that is what is truly the magic. And that's where it happens.
I love it. Well, Maggie, thank you so much for joining us. I know many people have been affected by your work positively, and we just wish you the best.
Yeah.
And I look forward to hopefully staying in touch and hearing from our listeners, how you've inspired them. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
That's a wrap on this episode of Commercial Real Estate Unfiltered. I hope you found value in today's conversation and feel more confident about navigating the world of commercial real estate. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who could benefit from these insights. You can connect with me, Caleb David, and the team at David Commercial Real Estate. Just check the show notes for more information. Thanks for listening, and remember, creating space is more than just real estate. It's about building community. See you next time.